Hello everyone, this is WaterfallJoe and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the idea of local photography, embracing your local photography spots. Now, when you think about photography and cameras and everything, you most likely think about traveling the world, going to a beautiful location, taking thousands of photos in the span of a few days, most likely sleep deprived if you're myself. And in this trip, you're taking some amazing photos, you're seeing some amazing sights, probably eating amazing food, just having the time of your life, seeing something that you don't usually see. And that's why we buy these cameras, that's why we do these things, is to go on these amazing trips and come home with photos that we'll never forget. But today I want to talk about embracing the spots more close to home. Now, everyone loves a good vacation, and my partner and I, we love traveling as much as we possibly can to these beautiful destinations. We have a whole list of places we want to go see, and we're not really sure how we're ever going to fit all of these into our lifetime. But today I want to talk about the part that's less stressful. The back at home, somewhere within a few hours of your house, somewhere that you can go to pretty frequently. You don't have to worry about hotels, airplanes, when do you get to the airport, how much weight can you bring with you. Today, we're going to take a step back, we're going to decompress a little bit, and we're just going to talk about embracing your local spots. So while I do appreciate some great travel photography across the country and across the world, today we're going to keep it close to home and just chit-chat about local photography. Let's dive in. So why are we giving local photography more love? So the reason I want to discuss this today is because I did just get back from traveling back to Missouri to see my family, and it got me thinking about all of the spots that I used to go to that I don't go to anymore now that we moved to Connecticut. And the first thing that I want to talk about is a lot of people don't do local photography because they say they live in an ugly part of the world. Now let me just tell you here, I lived in St. Louis, Missouri for most of my life up until a few years ago. Now, St. Louis, Missouri is not the ugliest place in the world, nor is it the prettiest place in the world. It is a pretty standard general area. It's a nice city surrounded by a lot of forest. On the Illinois side, you have countryside. North of St. Louis, you have country. South of St. Louis, you have some country and you have a little bit of elevation in the Ozark Mountains. But for the most part, St. Louis was pretty much flat, standard Midwest city, if you will. But the thing about it is, this is where you kind of have to start creating your vision as a photographer. Now, I lived in St. Louis, and I lived in the suburbs of St. Louis. Not a lot going on there in terms of photography, but I did start expanding my reach, and I actually found a spot in Illinois about 30 minutes from where I lived, and I spent so many days going there and taking pictures and just making the absolute best of it. And we're going to get to that spot in a minute. But the reason I'm talking about that is because I think the number one reason people don't do local photography outside of course, time and family constraints is they don't believe where they live is beautiful enough. Now, if you are a landscape photographer who loves to shoot waterfalls and mountains, and you live in the middle of Kansas, I have bad news for you. But this is where you're going to have to adapt and change your style and everything. And I think that's just part of photography, is overall just kind of adapting to different situations. Of course, we all want to go to the beach and shoot the sunset every night and get the beautiful clouds, but not all of us live along the coast. Not all of us can get to the beach every night. And I think that's just the first part of photography is being adaptable, being flexible, being able to work with what you have where you are. I personally found a spot in Illinois, and it kind of became a part of who I was as a photographer. I kind of adapted because I realized I'm not going to get a waterfall down the street from my house living in St. Louis, Missouri. But just across the bridge in Illinois, I can find this really cool barn that I can get to back to back to back, and I can get there and take pictures, and it's no problem at all to get there. And that just kind of became a part of my philosophy was, I have found a spot. It's not the most perfect spot, but for me, I can get there and I can channel my photography. I can go out with my camera, which in my opinion is just the best part, is just being able to go out with your camera in the first place and just have fun. So I just want to say that for my first recommendation is just make the best of where you live, regardless of where that is. Changing the way that you thought it would work out and just making the best of what it actually is. Embrace where you live, regardless of where that is. So another one of my favorite parts about local photography is it allows you to embrace and hone in your skills. So when I first got started, I really didn't know what the heck I was doing. I just started going out taking pictures at nighttime after work. I was just shooting. But the thing about it is, most likely when you get a camera, you're going to take it home, you're going to play around in the backyard, you're going to photograph pets if you have any, you're going to go to your local park, and this is where you start to learn. This is where you start to hone in your skills. Most people don't buy a camera and then go on this extravagant trip to Iceland for the Northern Lights and hope that they get good photos. or at least I hope not. Most people are going to buy a camera and shoot around their local parks after work, take it to work with them, Google things while they're at work, whatever it is. That's kind of a part of the process. You're in your local spots, might as well learn your camera while you're there. I can tell you for me personally, at the spot that I went to quite frequently when I lived in Missouri, sometimes I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to get the photo. And so I would go to this barn, and because it's a spot that I'm going to that isn't like this big touristy spot, there is no rush. You're not in line, you're not competing neck to neck with other people's tripods, You're at your spot, hopefully it's a nice peaceful location, and you can just take pictures. You don't have to compete with anyone. And I think that's just another part of the process of embracing your local photography. You're kind of at your own pace, doing your own thing. There's not a whole line of other people waiting to take the same picture as you because they saw it on Instagram. It's your thing. And I think that is really where you can master your skills at your own pace. Another thing I absolutely love about local photography is you are once again taking pictures that most likely not a lot of other people are doing. Remember, depending on where you live, you may not see a lot of photographers around. I know where I live now in Connecticut, I don't see photographers. I live in suburbia. There's no photographers around here. Now, of course, if I lived in New York City or in Los Angeles, you're going to see photographers everywhere. But most people who live in suburbia, like myself, don't go out and take pictures every day. So you're not going to see a bunch of other photographers at your local spot. That's why it's a great quiet location, most likely, where you can really focus on your skills. And depending on how you time it, you probably can get photos that not a lot of other people can get. I think that's one of the best things about having a local spot that you can go to reliably, get there back to back. You can go there and get pictures that not a lot of other people are going to get, especially if they're not local photographers. Okay, and the last reason that I want to talk about for having a local photography spot is you get to try out different equipment. Maybe you have a friend who's a photographer and you guys can swap equipment, and because it's your local spot, you can shoot it with your camera, you can shoot it with your friend's camera, you can go back the next day and try it with another friend's camera, you can compare, you can try different settings. Because you have a local spot, you have a reliable place where you can test everything. This is your own experimental warehouse, essentially. You have a place where you can go, you can take pictures. If you don't like them, you can go back another day, try something else. You're not limiting yourself to a one-time visit. Oh no, I blew the shot, the sky's overcast, I didn't get the rainbow, there's a person in the way. All of these things, they're not as important, they're not as crucial when you're at a local spot, because you can always go back. And now, before we move on to talk about some of my favorite spots that I used to go to all the time, I want to talk about the fact that there is no right or wrong local spot, but be there legally, of course. I don't have to say these things, but everyone has a different spot, especially as a photographer. For me personally, you guys know this, I love waterfalls, obviously, but I also love rustic barns. I also love country photography. And unfortunately, since we moved to Connecticut, I don't really have a lot of that anymore. I don't really have a barn I can go to as much anymore, but it has been replaced by waterfalls, which pretty awesome. But when I lived in Missouri, I would go to Illinois and I would photograph the barns. I kind of found a style that I love. I found a spot that works for me, that was within 20-30 minutes of the house that I could get to, no issues. I would come home from work, I would rush over to the barn if I saw that the clouds were looking amazing, or if I knew that it was going to be a nice sunset. I would drive over the bridge into Illinois, I would go photograph this barn. I found a spot that made me feel alive as a photographer. I knew if the weather was going to be good, I knew I was going to try to get over to that barn and take some photos. Maybe you're a street photographer who lives in suburbia and you're able to get down to your downtown city. Hopefully you found a spot that you can get to and you know that it's like your favorite corner in the city. Or let's say you're a macro photographer and there's a local park that has some of the best flowers you've ever seen. Everyone has a spot that is for their specific style of photography. And if there's anything you can gain out of this video, it is, I hope that you find a local photography spot that makes you feel alive, that lets you hone your skills and craft who you become as a photographer. And the best part about it is you can go back to it all the time, back to back, because it is right there. Okay, so that's enough of me rambling on about local photography. So now in this part, I want to talk about my favorite spots that I used to go to. So First, we're going to start with the spots that I used to go to when I lived in Missouri, and then we're going to talk about the spots that I go to now that I live in Connecticut. So when I lived in Missouri, of course, I was always looking for places to take photos, but as you spend enough time going out and shooting, you finally start to find the spots that really click with you. And for me personally, I found that there was these two barns located about 30 minutes away in the Illinois countryside. Now, I don't want to give out locations or anything because unfortunately I don't want to be the person, I don't want to be the cause if these places are vandalized. But I will say that they are located, you know, in the countryside of Illinois, a little south of St. Louis. So we're just going to leave it at that. You know, if you guys are really interested and you're local to St. Louis, I will happily send it to you. But these two are so special. They were actually located in two fields right next to each other. And it gave you this really cool opportunity. You could photograph at one, drive 2 minutes to the other, and get a completely different composition. So on the screen here, you're going to see some of my favorite barn photos. I shot these over the course of about 3 to 4 years. And that's kind of the cool thing about having a spot like this. I could go back anytime I wanted to and photograph it with whatever weather. So in one particular image here, I'll show you, I got it with these amazing purple flowers. And this was actually, I discovered this by chance. We were just driving by the barn, you know, as I frequently did. You know, if I had a weekend or if I had an evening after work with nothing going on, I'd take my camera out to the fields and just see how the barns looked. You know, was it a good sunset? Was it good blue hour? Were there good flowers? Was it a good foreground? But on this particular day, you know, everything just worked out great. We saw these beautiful purple, pink flowers covering the field, and, you know, we started photographing it, and then all of a sudden, boom, the sky lights up. You know, we didn't plan for these things. We were just hoping to get some barns, maybe with a good sunset, but we got the photos of the flowers. It was one of the most exhilarating things I'd have had. It was one of the most exhilarating moments at the barn, just seeing the sunset glow like this with the purple flowers. So Brennan and I hit the jackpot tonight.
Oh yeah.
And the thing about this barn is, I went back a week later and the field had been tilled, ready to be planted. So these flowers weren't there a week later. But the thing to note here is I was able to get there, get this photo out of pure luck, and it was only about a 30-minute drive from my house. But here on the screen, I'm just going to leave this up for a second. You can see these are some of my favorite images that I photographed at the barn. And, you know, here up in the corner, we have barn snow, barn summer, barn sunrise. You know, I kind of photographed it in all sorts of different weather. You know, we got it in the winter, we got it in the summer, we got it in the autumn. You know, of course, we got it in the spring, which was one of my favorites. You know, it was just fun having a local photography spot that you can frequent, you can get to. I even had a chance to photograph my buddy's Mustang there. I'm not a big American car guy, but of course the barn with the Mustang, Americana 101 right there, that was fun. For all I know, that barn could be as old as that Mustang. So yeah, that's my first example of having a local photography spot. As I mentioned, this was only about 30 minutes away from home. It was a spot that I would get home from work and I would look at the sky and see the clouds were crazy and I would drive over there. Not every time worked out. Of course, there's so many times I went to the barn and the sky was a complete bust. It was a waste of a drive. You know, I get there, things just don't line up. You know, it's not always perfect. But the beauty of it is because it's a local thing, I can get back there the next day or whatever, and it's not the end of the world. Versus if I miss the photo in Iceland, oh man, when's the next time I'm going to be in Iceland, you know? All right, so the next local spot I want to talk about is actually the spot I can give credit to pretty much honing in my love for waterfall photography. So this spot is incredibly special to me. Now, this is Don Robinson State Park in Missouri. Now, this park was about 45 minutes away, so it was definitely not as close as the barns, but in the grand scheme of things, this was an easy access, get there early morning on my day off, and have plenty of time to take pictures all day. Now, Don Robinson State Park was a very special park to me because this park had many waterfalls that only were flowing after a good rain. They were ephemeral waterfalls. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but essentially they were only flowing after a tremendous amount of rain. That's kind of how most of the waterfalls in Missouri worked, which kind of was what made me a waterfall photographer in the first place. Is I found it so exciting that I would get to a place in hopes to see it flowing, only to find it bone dry. It kind of got me hyped up about waterfall photography in the first place. But Don Robinson is the place I can give credit to making me a waterfall photographer. I would watch the weather forecast. My day off was Wednesdays, and I would start watching the weather forecast Saturday night, Sunday night. But if I saw that it was going to be raining Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or all 3 days, you can bet I was up at 6 a.m. Wednesday morning driving to Don Robinson in hopes of seeing one of the glorious waterfalls there flowing. Now, there was many times I drove to Don Robinson after a good rain or what I thought was a good rain, and there was nothing. That's just the joy of local photography. But on a few instances, I got to see such a lovely waterfall, and it really sparked the love for me of waterfall photography. This waterfall doesn't have a name. It's just a beautiful cascade in the forest, and here it is. This is the waterfall that kind of created my love for waterfalls. Here's kind of my favorite images that I've taken at Don Robinson State Park. These are over the span of about 4 years. 2018 to 2022, I would visit as often as I possibly could. Anytime I thought it was going to be raining, I would go to Don Robinson to photograph waterfalls. Once again, this was parked because it was local. I could go any time of the year. I got it in the midst of winter with everything dead. I got it in the middle of spring when everything was luscious and green. Unfortunately, I didn't really get any autumn photos there, unfortunately. But, we're able to get to these spots back to back and see it with different weather, see it with different seasons, with different amount of water flow. I hope at this point you guys have realized how much I appreciate photographing things that are close by. I think that's just so incredibly important as a landscape photographer. Okay, so let's talk about my local photography spot now here in 2025. So I now live in Connecticut with my partner. We moved here a few years ago. And one of the first things that I wanted to do when we moved here is, where can I go and take pictures? Photography is just a part of my life. Where can I go and shoot? Somewhere that's close by. Of course, there's New York City, there's the Adirondacks, there's Massachusetts, but here in Connecticut, where can I go take pictures? And I discovered the beautiful Wadsworth Falls State Park is about 30 minutes away. Now, to say that I've been a little bit obsessed with having a waterfall within 30 minutes is an understatement. When I lived in Missouri, I would drive 2-3 hours away to see a waterfall and risk it not even flowing. And when we moved here to Connecticut, I now have a waterfall that is pretty much always flowing year-round, only 30 minutes away. This was a huge win. This is a huge success, and I absolutely love having a state park with the waterfall only 30 minutes away. Now, I frequent this waterfall all the time. If you've seen any of my YouTube videos, I am most likely filming it at Wadsworth Falls. I absolutely love this place. I film so many of my reviews there because it's a spot that I love. It's easy to get to. I don't have to plan a whole day. I can go for a few hours and film and take photos and just have a good time. But this is a place that I've really been able to try out different equipment, test out different skills, test out different theories, try out different things, and just learn more about who I am as a photographer. Now on the screen here, you're gonna see I have a lot of Wadsworth Falls photos. Probably actually I still had even more. I couldn't fit them all in here because the names started overlapping, but all of these were taken from 2022 up until 2025. I'm sure as the years goes on, I'm gonna shoot a lot more. But you can see we have winter, we have summer, we have spring, we have autumn, we have up close, we have wide angle. We've got one with horses. We've got all sorts of different things. It's the same waterfall. We have different levels of flow. We have where it's rushing after a spring rain. We have it where it's almost dried up in the summer. This is kind of just a part of the beauty of having a spot you can get to, and I am extremely fortunate to have a waterfall within 30 minutes of my house. I used to not have a waterfall within 30 minutes of my house, and I still made the best of it wherever I would be. And right now, if I were to move anywhere, wherever it is, I'm going to find a spot within 20-30 minutes of my house that I can go to consistently and take photos, whatever it might be. And I hope that that's the message that I'm making clear. Is I think regardless of who you are, whatever your photography style is, having a spot that you can go to, test out different things, learn more about yourself as a photographer, and just learn more about how you do your work, I think that is so crucial, and I think it's kind of overlooked, definitely in this day and age of Instagram where everyone shares the most beautiful locations, and I definitely am a part of the problem. I love traveling and sharing photos from these great places, but I believe that your local hometown spots should be appreciated as well. So this is Waterfall Joe. Let me know what you think of the video. Do you have a local spot that you like to go to and take photos? Let me know. If you enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing for the next one. This is Waterfall Joe. Have a great day, and once again, appreciate your local photography spots. Take care.